Stardate 0303.2022. Welcome to Star Trek Discovery Pod. Kind of smart, kind of funny podcast about new and classic Star Trek. I'm your reluctant captain, Mike Garcia. With me on the view screen, we have.
Mariah Gossett.
Clyde Haynes.
All right. This week, we are streaming the pod live on YouTube as we try to do every Thursday. This is going to be a special episode. We're covering two episodes of brand new Star Trek this week because Paramount Plus decided to give us an abundance of riches. We're getting two Star Trek shows on at the same time for the first time since Voyager and DS9 were airing simultaneously, probably.
I think so, unless you're counting Prodigy and Discovery at the same time.
No. First two live action shows airing at the same time. Of course, I count Discovery and Prodigy. Those are kick-ass shows. Especially Prodigy, which we haven't talked about a lot, but I do enjoy Prodigy. But yeah, we're talking about the return of Jean-Luc Picard in season 2, the season 2 premiere of Picard, which dropped today on Paramount Plus, and we'll also make some time to talk about the latest episode of Star Trek Discovery Season 4, Rosetta. I have a feeling we might talk a little bit more about Picard. Before we dive into it, Clyde, can you remind folks about the live chat?
Well, if you are joining us live, whether that's on Facebook or YouTube or whatever, and you want to participate, want to hang out with us, want to let us know what you're thinking, want to share your thoughts, ask us questions, then you can simply type in capital P, capital O, capital D, capital pod in the chat, and we will get to your comments. Now, when it comes to that fateful time, and you want to share that thing that they share, when we share what we share, you know what I'm talking about. You just have to type capital H, capital F, capital HF in the pod and in the chat, and we'll get to your HF.
All right. You know what? Let's just dive into the conversation, the discussion, the review of Picard season 2, episode 1, with some hot freaks. All right. If you're new here, other podcasts have hot takes. We're a Star Trek podcast, so we have hot freaks. And let's talk about this Picard premiere. Anyone want to dive in first? Oh, and yeah, like Clyde said, listeners, drop your hot freaks in the comments. We'll talk about them too.
Mariah, all you.
All right, I'll go.
Okay.
I mean, there was lots of stuff I really enjoyed. I thought it was a really strong comeback from the first season. We had a time jump, which I always kind of appreciate, especially when we sort of left off with a lot of the book had been closed on that story, right? So we're starting fresh, we're starting new. They definitely said we're starting fresh and we're starting new with this episode. And we get the team back together in an interesting way. We get a little bit of catch up. My biggest qualm is I didn't get to see Seven and Raffi together. I have complaints. I need the 1-800 number for the complaints department, and because I have them. And I think we're getting into some interesting territories. I'm excited to talk to you all about my some theories, and I loved having Guinan back. I thought there were some things that I thought could have been stronger, but I'd give it like on a spicy meter, I'd give it like a medium spicy. It wasn't like the 5 chili peppers on the menu, but it was still good.
Clyde, was this a ghost pepper for you or a medium spicy?
This episode in particular, I don't know that it was like a ghost pepper, but it was hot. And I think what I'm really interested in is it's set up well, right? I think for me, what was really surprising is, look, I'm going to put it out there. When I think about what we saw in season 1 to what we got in season 2, I'm going to tell the pod what I said to you guys, which is, what the hell happened? Like, what transpired? Because Mariah, to your point, you talk about a restart. Listen, no disrespect intended, but this feels like a new show, right? This felt like someone really did press the reset button. and said, okay, I love it. Like, I feel like they learned from their, I don't want to call them mistakes, but they took a look at what they did. They thought about what they were trying to do and said, okay, let's retool this. I'm very impressed by where we've gone. And I think it sets up well. For the first time in a long time, I'm incredibly interested in where this story goes. And I think that there are a couple things that we've been talking about since season 1 ended, and we started getting teasers and hints and looking at the staff. Like, this could have been a bit of a mess, right? So we knew that John Delancey and Whoopi Goldberg were coming back to reprise roles of Q and Guinan. And so we knew that. They could have strung that out for 3-4 episodes, and they gave them to us both in episode 1, which tells me that this isn't about cheap parlor tricks. This isn't about guest stars. And again, I'm not trying to throw shade, right? But Brent Spiner and Jonathan Frakes, that wasn't critical to the story last season. Like, it popped up and was like, okay, it was cool. We're getting homage to TNG. They said, we're going to get that stuff out of the way episode 1 because we got story to tell. And that's what's exciting to me. Now, I wasn't excited. Like, things that we talked about, like we wanted to know what's up with Laris. How come Laris got so very little play in, season 1, and now we see her front and center in season 2, and again, while she was there, she got not a lot of play. If you get my drift, I just don't understand why Picard didn't, but he completely fumbled that. That was a mistake.
Yeah.
Completely, like, dude, like, you're old as sand, and she's throwing herself at you, and you just kind of
technically he's a year and a half old, right? Like, his synth body is like a
true. I mean, take that body out for a spin, man. See what it can do.
Yeah, see what it can do.
So I mean, but that's, at least they gave us a little bit of something, because they knew that this is stuff that we were paying attention to, right? We got to see, and look, there's a comment in the chat that I agree with about, I did need the drop us into chaos and then back us up and go 48 hours earlier. I don't know that I needed that. But it was really cool to see the where are they now. Like, I don't know. I'm goofy. I like that. But to see Rios and to see Girardi and even Soji, like, to see all those, to see where everybody was really kind of cool.
I'm with you. I'm with you, Clyde. I maybe it was that I went in with lowered expectations because I wasn't the biggest fan of season 1. There's great bits of season 1, but as a whole, it just didn't work for me. But this was awesome. This was really good. This episode reminded me of 2 of my favorite Star Trek movies in tone, in vibe, maybe even in intention. It reminded me of Star Trek First Contact, the one where Picard fights the Borg. And it's Frakes did a great job with the pacing of that as a director, and he did a great job with the cinematography as well. And the story was nice and tight, and it was also a celebration of everything Star Trek was at that point, because that was at a key anniversary for the franchise when that movie came out, and it was celebrating the greatness of Star Trek. Everything we love about it was just on screen deliberately, and they were making the fans happy while also giving us giving the general audience a story they could enjoy. And I think that's what's happening here. Also, it's also like Star Trek 4, where the Whales one, where the original crew just has this kind of lived in familial vibe, and it feels kind of like chill and kind of goofy and kind of relaxed, even though there's all this chaos happening. Because unlike the first season, which makes sense because all these new characters are getting to know each other, so are the actors. But this season, already it's clear that these actors are gelling. These characters have a history. They have a shorthand with each other. The chemistry between all of them is such a joy to watch. Clyde, you always talk about, like, you want your crew together, and we got a crew in this. We, like, at the end, it felt like we artificially got a crew with a real crew with Rios and with Girardi and Seven, Raffi, Elnor, and Picard. It kind of didn't feel like they were, homies, but in this episode, it felt right, when Rios is kind of letting Girardi do her thing on his ship, and he's like, yeah, just let her do her thing, and they're having this little shorthand. That felt so great, and it just made me root for these characters. Like, I like the characters in this show more than ever. And the show is having fun. It's celebrating Star Trek. It's giving us this cool familial chill vibe from the cast, and it's giving us a pretty interesting mystery story. Not to mention that Q's back. Fucking shut up. Not to mention the Borg are back, and in a different way. And I am very excited to see how different the Borg are going to be in this series, and how the show is going to use them in a fresh way. Because even aside from the visuals of the Borg, everything we got of the Borg here was new and different and surprising. The Borg Queen actually beams into the ship. Tentacles come out. She's like zapping shit, and she looks like a villain from the Matrix with like a black face. Like, it was wild, and it was very surprising. Guys, I liked it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Mike, you mentioned the team up. I do love a good team up, and there's a sci-fi book series, The Expanse, that they turned into a show. And my biggest critique is, in the book, you get characters who really know each other. And when they know each other, they care about each other. So you understand why they do the stuff that they do. And I didn't think that translated that well into the TV production of it. That's what I felt like we got last year, right? I think in the last season, it was these characters who were thrown together, but I didn't believe that they cared for one another.
Yeah.
Right. And I think when you have a team, and that's the thing that I think when we look back at whether it was TNG, whether it was Voyager, whether it was DS9, and even Enterprise, what we got is they quickly moved from people thrown together to people who would put their lives on the line for one another. I feel like we're getting that now.
And there can still be conflict. It feels like in Picard, we have that vibe where I'll jump in front of a phaser for this person, but I can still have conflict with that person and different ideas. So it feels richer.
And I mean, to your point, Clyde, about like now these characters all care about each other, right? Is like these shows don't get 22, 24 episode series buys anymore. So, you felt that probably seemed like it moved quicker in those shows in some ways because it just had more time on screen together versus like you just had one singular season. And now we have all of these characters who seemingly who do care about each other. But I did think it was an interesting reset. I feel like I'm hoping we get some more development about, like it feels like a big 180 for characters like Raffi and for Rios, who went from being a little bit more, swashbuckler, like, I don't know, like rebel rousing, to now wearing Starfleet uniforms, and how that is going to sort of inform their characters moving forward. I did love that Seven went back to working for the Ferris Rangers and kind of getting to see her in action over there. I really enjoyed that piece of it. But I think it's going to be, I'm excited for the series. To see like how they're going to be playing with time. What I took from it pretty early on is we are finally going to get Picard's full childhood backstory, which I don't think I am not as familiar with Picard, but I did a ton of reading today to make sure I wasn't going to misspeak about that. We've never really heard anything about his father. And seeing his mother, and now we have a full backstory for where his English accent comes from. He has a mom with an English accent. But what was also very funny to me, I don't know if y'all have watched the series Single Drunk Female, but the actress who plays Picard's mom in Picard now also plays this very silly character in that show. And so I was like, whoa, you are not the same person, but you look exactly the same.
Tonal dissonance for you.
So like opposite spectrum. It was very funny to see that. But but yeah, seemingly there's a really darkness there. And like, so I think similar to, we'll get into it when we start talking about Discovery, but what I thought was interesting about both episodes today is they both seem to play on the idea of like familial past trauma. And so seemingly going into this, we have to go back to our past to fix the future, right? Is this big theme that is happening in this season of Picard. And I'm really interested to see how this all plays out.
Hey, Mariah, you when you talk about kind of the team up and it feeling like it was short, one of the things that I thought about was your favorite show, right? And that is Voyager. In that
they did not like each other for a long time.
Well, I guess that's the thing. I mean, you're having me rethink it, because it felt, to your point, it felt like you had two people who were enemies thrown together, and in a couple episodes they kind of started to gel. But maybe I'm maybe I remember that wrong. I thought they did a phenomenal job of bringing a misfit, gang of people together and gelling. But maybe it did take longer than I remember.
There was definitely some tension as the series went on, between the Maquis and the Starfleet people, for sure. That was one of the cooler things about that show. Mariah, you mentioned going back to Picard's childhood, and there's a line in this episode where Picard beams up to the Stargazer, or lands, it docks at the Stargazer, and he's like, I feel like my life is coming full circle. And it's like he's talking to the audience, because we're finally going all the way back to where his real trauma lies, right? Maybe even recontextualizing why he went out into space. And it lies with some darkness with his family. Obviously, it seems like there was an abusive father issue, potentially, which is very interesting. And I didn't think we'd go there, but I think if they're going to talk about childhood trauma and incorporate the character or the theme of parental abuse or an abusive father. Sorry, I got a bunny chewing a box over here. I want to say that this show might actually handle it with care and grace, because Patrick Stewart grew up with an abusive father, and he's been very vocal about it for the past several years, to the point where I believe he works to raise awareness for children who come from abusive homes, and for women who are abused domestically by men. I think that's that's a passion that he holds dear, advocating for those causes. And he is a producer on this show. So if they're going to go deep into that, I think it is going to be real, and it is going to be emotional. It will land, which I didn't think this show would do, but it's surprising, and it's ambitious, and it's good. So yeah, what do you guys think about that aspect?
Well, Mike, I think you hit on something that I think is really interesting, and Mariah, I think you mentioned it too. When he goes back to the Stargazer, that has a significant meaning for us old timey Star Trek fans. And that's because we've always felt like the Stargazer was the epicenter of Picard's trauma, for lack of a better word, right? Like that was his first, shot at leadership, and he failed, right? The ship, I think it was
taken. Right?
The Ferengi beat him.
Well, and Beverly Crusher's, Beverly Crusher's husband died, right? Like this was supposed to be the thing that changed him to become the captain he became, right? This first failed attempt at leadership really kind of focused him and changed who he was, right? So I think for a long time we felt like Star Trek post TOS started with the Stargazer. And now what we're going, no. That's not the beginning, right? The beginning is we're going to go back to his childhood. And that is new. This is new for all of us to go. We are going to uncover where his trauma, where he was formed, where these things happened. And it's an interesting ride. And I think you're right, Mike. We're diving into something that's a bit darker, probably a little bit more relatable. I don't know how many of us can relate with failing as a starship captain. And then I thought it was interesting, and we'll probably get into this a little bit later, but we see elements of that in both shows tonight. Right? When we think about Detmer and her past. So it's interesting when we think about kind of the meta messages that are being kind of presented to us.
I love that both of you picked up on that thread of the familial trauma coming to a head on screen in both shows this week. Before we dive in more, I'm going to jump into some of these hot frakes from our listeners. P.W. Gregory, Clyde, you alluded to this earlier. Hot frake. I just wish they didn't begin with the scene in the beginning before they pull the old 48 hours earlier trope. Keep the reveal for longer. I like the in media res beginning in this. I know it's a trope, but it really, for me, what it did was present the almost big screen worthy action cinematography to me right away, and that really pulled me in and made me think, wow, this is going to be a big deal. So I like that opening.
Yeah. Do you think they just didn't want to start the exact same way the first season was, which is the pan down onto the vineyard?
I think because that was like the second scene, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, back to the vineyard. We'll play some Motown.
To your point, I have to say, there's something inside me that yawns every time I see that vineyard. I'm just like, oh my god. It's like, it is probably my least favorite set in all of Star Trek. Like,
at least it wasn't just Picard like alone in the vineyard. Like there was actually action going on in the vineyard.
It was harvest season.
People were harvesting. There was a little story there. They were finishing the end of harvest season, and it brought us right into that nice scene with Laris after a job well done, a day of hard work.
And she goes in for the kiss and is cold-faced.
I just don't get it. Like,
what do you guys think about that? The fact Star Trek has dealt with this a little bit before. The fact that Jean-Luc never had a family, never opened up his heart truly to anybody, is always kind of guarded. We dealt with this last season a little bit, but it seems like the show is really focusing on Picard. You never settle down with someone you love. Why not? And what has broken your heart, Picard, that you can't give yourself to somebody?
Vosh.
I hope they take it though is that Picard figured out how to love a lot of people instead of having to just be with one person, because I do think it's like it's like disappointing, the idea that you aren't a fully realized person if you didn't like get married and have kids. It's like, I don't think that has to be true for you to have lived a long and fulfilling life. I do think they're probably leaning into it with his whole speech of like, I am the last Picard, like this whole thing. Who knows, perhaps by going into the future something's going to change and he's going to wake up in the correct timeline with like a wife and children. Who knows? But yeah, I think there's obviously some trauma there. He's had romance and romantic relationships throughout the series for sure. So I think it'll be, I am interested in what his hesitation is with Laris. If it's just like, hey, like we work together and like your husband that you were betrothed to from birth died a year ago. Like,
yeah, and he was my friend.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like, maybe I should wait on this there between him and Lars. But she's like, hey, I'm over that. It's my culture to move on. Let's do this. So
but then he's probably gonna go like save her and realize he has feelings for her. And
I think he already realizes it, but he's afraid.
All we were talking about at that moment was a kiss, right? Like, a couple things can happen. You could kiss and then go, this feels a little weird. Maybe we should stop.
But there were definitely during the vineyard scenes a few looks at each other where you kind of get the vibe of like longing looks, and the kiss would be a confirmation of, okay, we both feel this way. Let's move forward. So and he's not there.
Here's my thing in that. Okay. So you could kiss her and y'all could try it, and then it doesn't work out and you're like, oh, it's all awkward. Maybe one of us should leave. Or you could not kiss her, wake up the next morning, it's all awkward, and then one of you decides to leave.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. More hot frakes. Mr. Joseph 45 says Picard really knocked it out of the park with its opening episode. It was so much fun, and it was great to see ships from Star Trek Online canonized. The ships look dope in this. Like, oh, Clyde will be back in a minute. The ships look really dope in this. I like, at first, like with the Stargazer having like 4 nacelles on top of the other. I was like, oh, that's a little garish. But the second time I watched it, I was like, actually, that looks dope. I like it.
Yeah, and it follows, like, if you look at the progression of the Stargazer models that we've seen throughout time, I thought it was a logical progression there. I liked seeing all of the different ships. I know there's people who have been like analyzing those screenshots to figure out what's in there, and there's some fun Easter eggs, including I just pulled up a bunch of the Easter eggs.
It was Hikaru Sulu, a ship named after Sulu, which is great.
Yes. And I also saw in the credits, like, there was a thank you to Star Trek Online, which I know, like, I'm not a big video game person, but I know that community was like really stoked online today to see stuff that they've,
some of the ships.
Yeah, some of the ships and different things that they've been working with. So that's really cool. I was also going to bring up, I thought, did y'all sneak a peek at the book that he grabbed for Elnor?
Yeah, it was written by Spock.
Yes.
It was about Spock, I guess,
it's
his first years in the academy and trying to integrate. Yeah, I thought that was
I missed that.
That was a beautiful gift. That was a beautiful moment, I thought.
It's now that you tell me it's a beautiful moment, I can look back and go, oh, it's a beautiful moment. At the time I was thinking, Picard giving books.
It's called The Many and the One.
Yeah, that's so good. It's so good. Yeah, he even says this was written by Spock, and it's about his coming to being the first Vulcan in the academy. And I like that progression for Elnor. Let's talk about where our characters are now. Mard says Rios in a Starfleet uniform? ? I know, Mariah, you mentioned this. It's kind of weird, but I think it's cool. Santiago Cabrera is like my MVP in this episode. First playing Emmett at the beginning, which is just fucking hilarious. And then, of course, rocking it as Rios. He still has an edge to him. He's still like chomping on a cigar and kind of shaggy, even though he's a Starfleet captain.
It would be really annoying to have someone smoking a cigar on the bridge.
He didn't light it. He was flipping the lighter on and on.
Didn't he give it a little?
I don't remember.
Toasty?
Maybe.
I feel like
maybe
toasty.
But come on, it's a space cigar. It's not going to hurt anybody. It's not real. It's synthetic, probably. But I think he kept his edge and his vibe. But he did seem like he was in a better place, which I wanted for that character. And it also seems like the actor's just having a blast doing it. So I like seeing Rios in Starfleet without completely changing the character. It just seemed like a progression for him.
Well, I thought he absolutely kept his edge, and it's very different. I think what's interesting is, we look at these shows and we always think about the Mount Rushmore of Starfleet captains. We think about who's on the roll call of Starfleet captains. I don't know where we're going to put Rios. I don't know if he's included in that. And part of what I noticed was when you talk about that edge, Mike, is he shot far differently than any other captain, right? Like a lot of times when you think about whether it's Sisko or Janeway or Kirk or Archer or Picard, they're shot straight on where they're the sole focus. And I feel like Rios is always shot a little wider. So you see him in context of the ship, and the lighting, his lighting aboard whether the Stargazer or the Serena is always darker, right? It's always like moody and edgy, and he just doesn't quite fit. But I dug that here because often we think of you join Starfleet and you change, for lack of a better word, assimilate to Starfleet, right? And the one thing I thought we got here was really neither Elnor or Rios assimilated into Starfleet, right? They're still kind of them, right? I'm hoping that we see some, murder nun-ish in Elnor, and he's not completely dulled by wearing that outfit.
But they're still definitely them, because as Puds 38 points out, Rios's engage phrase is "dale," which was amazing. Like when I heard that, I was like, yes, because I say that around the house. Like when it's time to leave or it's time to cook, I'm like, "dale." I'm like, yes, I was like, that's perfect. I loved it. Mariah, how are you feeling with where our characters are in their progression?
I mean, I feel like the character I'm the most concerned for is Girardi, because we see her sort of playing almost second fiddle to oh my gosh, I'm blanking on her name. Soji, and kind of touring around. Soji's not in there for now, but we know that that's not going to stay the same. But she's like drunk, touting, like obviously has some ex-boyfriend issues, some murdered ex-boyfriend issues, like many issues going on, and somehow still manages to get onto the deck and starts like messing with tech while a little drunk. I was a little like, okay, I see you're trying to like maybe curve a little favor with your ex-girlfriend here, Rios, but like I don't know if she should be translating some Borg materials while inebriated.
Yeah, she's clearly. I like that she is on the ship, but she is not part of Starfleet. I mean, she's her own thing. She works
like
for
an
the
ambassador
Institute. Yeah, she's like like an ambassador or just somebody who comes in and helps out.
Yeah, it's interesting
doing
to
her
me.
Own thing.
They've sort of flipped almost like where Girardi and Raffi were at the beginnings of the first season. Like now Raffi sort of like seemed to have calmed some of her inner demons and is now working at Starfleet Academy, and she's like watching Elnor and keeping an eye on him. And now Girardi is just like off traveling the galaxy, getting drunk at different bars, while Soji charms people to be like, see, androids aren't all that bad.
Yeah, I did want more from Michelle Hurd as Raffi in this episode. Hopefully, we'll get more from her as the series goes on. But yeah, Raffi was just kind of there.
Yeah,
I'm taking care of Elnor. Yeah, that might be my one complaint for sure. Chupi Chupi in our chat has an answer to your question of Clyde of what happened this season that made Picard good. And Chupi says, what happened was a really long time to write over the pandemic.
I mean, maybe so. I mean, you're probably right.
I don't know if they actually had that much extra time, because they've been filming through most of the pandemic, and they, I think, are just about done shooting season 3, because they're just like
really,
they're going through it. Marge was talking about the cinematography, saying it's beautiful, very film-like. Yeah, this thing kind of like Disco. It looks like a big screen action movie. It's great.
Yeah.
Another thing about the cinematography is that it's evolved to the point where it's reflective of who we are today as a TV watching community. And that's because like the pacing is very different. What we're seeing, like, we talk about that we don't like the 48 hours flashback, but what we do see is we're dropped pretty much right into the middle of a space battle, right? And so we're looking at the ships are moving around, like we're in the middle of the heat, and at the end, we're back into this battle. That's very much a reflection of a little bit of our attention spans today, but what we expect when we watch kind of a space opera. Whereas if you think about it, like, how long was it in TNG before we got a real space battle? Right?
Yeah. The big action scene in TNG was when in the TNG premiere was when the saucer section slowly separated from the rest of the ship for like 8 minutes, which I liked.
And the jellyfish.
And the jellyfish. I mean, the real action came at Farpoint Station when Q was putting them on trial. That was the real action.
Yeah.
Right. It really wasn't the action didn't take place on the ship. Here we're jumped right into it. And that's kind of cool. Like it's a different vibe altogether.
Okay, so I felt like the fan service in this episode didn't feel too fan servicey. Maybe the biggest thing that felt fan servicey was Guinan. I love Whoopi Goldberg. I love Guinan, and they did a pretty okay job of making Picard going to talk to Guinan and get her counsel work with the story. But it also felt like we just kind of want to get Whoopi in here. But I'm not mad at it. How'd
No,
you
I'm
guys feel?
hoping.
Go
Oh,
ahead,
I'm
Mariah.
hoping she pops up like maybe one or two more times throughout the season, because then I think it'll feel more earned. Like this
Yeah.
whole I'm going back to talk to a confidant, or maybe she's going to be able to help them in some way along their journey as they go back in time. But I loved the bar. I thought the set design was great. There's a lot of really fun like Easter eggs in that bar, like the logger sign, the Andorian, and there's a logger sign that's like from the Search for Spock.
Oh, cool. Oh,
And
yeah.
Production design went like ham on Easter eggs, y'all. Like if
Yeah.
you watch enough scenes, and I've seen some stuff on Twitter where it's like the floral plate that is behind Picard and some shots of his house is like from a hologram that he used to have of his hat. Anyway, it's just like
Wow.
the attention to detail is really incredible. My biggest thing is that they pulled like you took two characters who don't age and basically gave me the same excuse for both characters to then look older. And I wish it was just because like Whoopi still looks pretty good. And so I was just like, you could have easily just been like, yes, I do age slower. That was enough.
That would have been
me.
it. Yeah.
I don't need like a I've decided thing. And then it would have made the Q snap, oh, I'll match you thing feel a little bit funnier. I think than the Q joke of it all would have been like more earned.
Yeah. I struggle with the like look, I love Whoopi. I'm not gonna complain about Whoopi being on the show in any context. I do think they could have given her a little bit more to do. I think they could have integrated her in the story, because my issue is if you cut that scene, you don't lose anything in this episode. And that's the problem with me. Like, because I didn't necessarily need, you need to look inside yourself. I didn't need that. I didn't really need that for the rest of the story.
I think for me as a fan, like Picard goes to Guinan when he really needs some counsel, when there's something really weighing on him, and maybe sometimes when he's lost. So that to me was a signal of that, right? So it worked for me that way.
The other issue I had was, did it have to be a bar? Like she's gonna spend all this time with as a bartender?
My spouse is like, what would have been the better future Guinan is if she was a bud tender. Like,
oh
like
yeah,
go to a weed shop.
I would have laughed at that.
I was just like,
absolutely would have laughed.
I'm like, at this point, you can probably buy that at the grocery store. I don't think.
And like Rafi's in the corner, like smoking out,
having a great time.
It just like I get that it was kind of like this homage to her being on 10 Forward, but I was just like, really, like all this time,
I didn't need that. Yeah,
back at a bar, like she could have been
cool
anywhere. Yeah, she could have been anywhere. And I think about when you think about all the other characters, when we think about that TNG cast, they've all graduated, they've all moved on, they've all increased in rank, increased in family. She's still tending bar.
Running a casino or something would have been cool. Like, I don't know, but there's also I get it though. There is like I don't know. I have friends who are like professional, like they have been bartenders for a long time, and like that is who they are and it's what they do. And like I definitely get like when that is your profession of choice in a way.
At least I get that. I think it's okay. I'm just happy they didn't like make her like the host of a call-in show, like giving advice like Frasier or something cheesy like that. Like that would have been bad.
They should have made her a podcast host. That would have been
the podcast host. About Guinan, Takako says in the TNG episode Yesterday's Enterprise, Guinan was the only one who noticed a change in the timeline. Guinan must be on Earth of the alternate path so that Picard can seek her out. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me. Guinan, as an Ilarian, she has those extra sensory capabilities. So when we do get the what looks like a reset of time, an alternate timeline at the end of this episode, maybe Guinan's the one they need to seek out. Okay. Real quick, guys, we're getting to the end of the hour. We need to talk about Discovery a little bit.
Yes.
But tell me about what you thought about Q, and if you have any theories about the timeline reset that we saw at the end of this episode. Oh, and the Borg.
Oh my gosh, so much to fit in. I mean, they had the like coming up on Picard thing, right? So apparently they have to go to Los Angeles 2024, which is not that far. It's 2 years in the future from right now. So something that happens within that time frame is going to set us off on this authoritarian regime or whatever. Very far distant future, and they have the solar shield and all this stuff. And so my theory is we're getting our Save the Whale season, and it's not going to be whales, it's going to be climate change.
It's going to be something.
No.
Save the spotted owl.
If you are new to the podcast and you don't understand why I'm looking or sounding the way I am, I love Star Trek. Everyone knows this. I'm a huge fan.
How are you going to
hate them damn whales?
It's the best.
I think they're just going back in time to kill Joe Rogan. That's what they're going to do.
I think, it's funny because I keep hearing, I watched the episode a couple times. I heard the 2024, and Mariah, until you said it, it didn't dawn on me that is 2 years from now. I hate this. Like, I hate when they go, we're going to go back in time to the present.
Yeah, they all do it.
They all do it, and I hate it.
I love it.
Here's the reason why I hate it. Because I'm that guy. Because you don't like years joy. From now, 10 years from now, when I'm rewatching this episode, I'm gonna get annoyed. Okay, right? I much more prefer when they go, we're gonna go back in time to 2124, right?
Like in First Contact, yeah, they went to their past, but our future.
Yes, I like.
But like, I watched Star Trek 4, and I just love the 80s-ness of it. Like, it's great. It's fun. Yeah. It's stuck in time in a beautiful, like, amberish way.
Though, to your point, Mariah, I don't mind if they go to my past, right? Like the Casino Royale episodes and stuff like that. I don't mind that because I'm looking at something that goes, okay, well, this is kind of interesting too. It's just when they come to our contemporary timeline that I'm like, this feels a little weird. So that'll be interesting. Mike, to your point, Q is interesting to me. He feels a little different. We talked on the Strange New World podcast about how he's very much a jokester. The tenor doesn't sound as jokey so far.
Yeah,
right.
Sounds serious. Yeah.
He sounds a little bit more serious.
I mean, he did open with "Mon Capitaine."
he did, but it feels different.
A little more mustache twirly than
a little bit more
winky.
mustache. Yeah, like I think here's the thing we talked about before is that Q has always felt mischievous but safe. I'm not getting that safe vibe right now.
He's
right,
wearing
like
funeral blacks, like
it is. He just like usually I think of okay, Q's gonna let it go so far, and then he's gonna come in and pull you back, right? This time I don't know. Like I really don't know. Like it feels a little bit different.
Sure,
we'll see. And then the last thing I wanted to say was the Borg Queen when she drops in. Legit looks like stuff I've seen on like RuPaul's Drag Race at this point. So I was like, I mean, if you're gonna be like a queen, like I've definitely seen outfits that look like that on an episode of Drag Race.
Very queenish. Yeah. She looked metal, dude. And I think some people might have been like wondering if that is really the queen. Like Thomas Hill in our chat says it was so cool to see the Borg, but that was not the queen. It was more machine than anything. When I was watching with the captions on, the Borg did say we're going to send the queen, and then when the entity talked, it said Borg Queen. So that's definitely the queen.
I think I like Thomas. I was questioning, well, is this the queen? Because it was unlike anything that we were used to seeing when you talk about the queen.
Yeah.
It definitely looked more. It looked somewhat menacing, but it was so covered. I just couldn't tell like how menacing was this. But the whole reimagination of the Borg is interesting because I felt like if we go back to what we've seen of the Borg previously, the Borg is very nerdy, right? It's very robotic. This looked badass. Like this looked like Warrior Borg.
It was like coming out, and it almost reminded me of the Kelvin movies, like when that ship comes out of the like wormhole kind of situation.
The Romulan ship. Yeah. That was cool.
It had a knight feel. Like this is a warrior, like a medieval warrior in armor. And I was like, okay, like I'm now scared of this.
Also different about this Borg, they didn't shoot first. They didn't come to assimilate. They came to be a part of the Federation. That was the message they were giving out. The articles of whatever who want to join the Federation, which is odd, could be a trap. But when the Queen boarded, it was 7 who attacked first, obviously.
Or no, it was a cadet. It wasn't 7.
It was a cadet, and then 7. But the Queen was only stunning people.
But then she was like, I need power. And like, honestly though, it does, like, from the minute that thing was like, help us, Picard, I was like, it's a trap.
Well, but that's the interesting thing about this is that
there's more to it, I think.
Previously, when we think about the Borg don't lie. They don't trick you, right? They show up and go, we're going to assimilate you. Like it's not, there's no deception.
But if
it's
this
more
is the
arrogance.
New Borg and they've had to learn to adapt to humans.
This is different.
Yeah, Kern has a good point. Borg have had to change tactics after what Janeway did to them in Endgame. I can see them adapting to survive. They're getting sneaky. But I have a theory that I can't talk about right now.
Okay.
Because it involves future episodes, and we have screeners and we've seen more, so we can't talk about them. But stay tuned next week.
But yeah, I would love to jump to Disco. So I was going to give everyone like a quick, this is your warning, spoilers. If you haven't watched Discovery yet, this is your time to adios amigos.
Why are you listening to this if you haven't watched Disco yet? Go watch it.
Changing
sometimes
to
I want to hear us
Disco.
talk about Picard.
Changing to Disco after this noise. All right, Disco now.
I'm glad
I don't know what that was.
We had a dance and a weird sound effect.
All right, Mariah, hot freak on Disco. What was it called?
It was called the Rosetta.
The Rosetta.
And I really enjoyed this episode. We finally got some forward momentum into figuring out what is going on with these 10 Cs. It's feeling very jellyfish vibes to me, like from that planet, which I think is really cool. I am excited because we're at the place of special effects where we can finally perchance be seeing aliens that are not humanoid, which I'm just like, they have to exist in this universe, right? Like that has to, and now we're even outside of our universe. So yes, give me something that does not look like anything I've ever seen before. And I know the creature designers who work on this show are extremely talented. So I'm like, I have really high expectations about what these 10 Cs are going to look like. I loved the like sneaky sort of espionage stuff going on with Book and Tarka trying to infiltrate the ship. I'm more excited to watch Reno rip him apart now that she's on their ship.
Yes.
And for that confrontation to come to a head. And I really enjoyed the time down on the planet. We got to see a new world. We got to talk about new species. We're moving the plot ahead. We got some really interesting backstory to Detmer, which I also liked. And it was one of the few, like, we're going to talk about my backstory moments that felt very genuine and authentic in the moment to me this season for a lot of our bridge crew. So I'm like, I was really a little peeved for a while this afternoon that I couldn't find more people talking about this episode of Disco because everything was like Picard. And I was like, this was a really good episode of Disco. So yeah,
I gotta agree with you, Mariah. I really enjoyed this episode of Disco, and there were all these touch moments that really spoke to me, right? Like I love the Adira wanting to get to know Detmer and being awed by Detmer, and you know, Jet's word of advice, hey, don't start with I want to be you.
Yeah.
Like that was perfect.
I was just like, me trying to make friends as an adult. I'm right there with you.
Maybe that's what it is. Here I am. I'm in LA. I'm in my and trying to make friends. Like, I thought that was great advice, and I was like writing it down. Okay, so when you see somebody and you think they're cool, don't say something like "fly good" and don't say "I want to be you." Got it. I also thought like the moment where she did engage her, and she was able to talk. That connection, to your point, felt genuine. I thought that Colbert being able to say, "I'm not okay." We all need to be able to say that and own that after the last 2 years that we've been through, right? And so when I think about all the things that they've been through and being able to stand up and say, "I'm not okay. I am trying, but I am struggling," I thought was an important message. To your point, the Detmer backstory really resonated. And then I had moments that I loved and I hated, right? So here's the thing that drove me a little nuts. You have one of the most technological ships on the in ever, right? You've got your ship is so technologically advanced, it actually is alive, right? It thinks for itself.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, not only can you beam onto this without anyone knowing, you can then parasite attached to it.
Tarka is magic.
End of story. There, and not to jump on your hot freak, but the other thing with watching these 2 episodes sort of back to back is like some of the things they were using were also the same ways we used to get on and off Borg ships, like in Voyager and like similar tech. And so I was like, oh, there's a nice little through line if you're paying attention to these 2 things.
Well, but the thing I did love is that moment, the moment where Book is on the other side of the wall from Burnham, and right before he leaves, I thought was a really great moment. And the reason why is because they're on polar opposite ends of philosophical beliefs, but he still cares. They're doing things differently. They're for all intents and purposes, they're enemies right now. And yet you still see that he cares. And that's important, because sometimes I think we get caught up in looking at the person and what they do, and we almost want to cut off because they don't move the way we want. They defy our expectations. They don't fit into the mold that we have for them. And here what we see is we see Book going, "Man, I really care about her. I don't know if we're going to be together, but we're on opposite ends of this." So I thought that was a really good moment. I struggled a little bit with like the Earth general and Burnham kind of being on opposite ends. Like, I'll be honest, for me, seeing this trio of Black characters backstab and connive behind each other's backs, I didn't love. I guess it's March, so it's no longer Black History Month, so I should be okay. But I didn't love that. But I understood the need to have differing viewpoints, and I was shocked about Jet being in the brig. Although I thought it was cool when she was just like, "Tell me I walked into a surprise party." Like, yeah. I was like, she is the best character.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I did enjoy this episode. The best thing I liked about it was how it made space for everybody to really, like that scene with Colbert, like you said, Clyde, talking about how he's not okay, and then the scene where everyone's emotions came to the forefront. I really like the theme that Discovery is putting characters up just as important as plot and story, character depth, and exploring their trauma and their issues. That was extremely evident in this episode. I also love that the thrust of the episode was about, okay, we got to go and find some cultural context and a way to speak to these new aliens before we charge in, telling them that we know the universe better and asking them to stop doing what they're doing. We have to learn about them first. I thought that was amazing. That was a great classic Star Trek idea that was brought to the forefront in this episode. Yeah, again, like last week, I didn't like the pacing of this. It just felt kind of like a slog to me, even though there were good intentions, good acting, good scenes. It just felt super slow. Maybe I just want to see these 10C aliens already, and it's just taken a while to get there.
Yeah, and I was going to say, Clyde, what I did appreciate about like kind of this triangle between like Burnham, Book, Tarka, and the general is that the general is sort of acting as this like middle point of like, no, like I do believe in diplomacy and we're going to try this out, but I do want like press the emergency button and know that someone's just going to like at least take this out right before it destroys my planet.
That saved it for me. The line that she said when she says, I want to be the backup, you have to let diplomacy have a chance. I felt like, okay, that helps where she's really at this point being her own character and focused on kind of her needs, and the conflict is not meaningless. It actually felt like it started to serve a purpose. Before that, I was like, what the hell am I looking at? Like this, it touched me in a place that was uncomfortable. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to trust the writers a little bit and ride with them for a little bit longer, but cut this shit out.
I didn't really like that, but I didn't like the Earth representative, doing that, but it did make story sense to me because she did vote against diplomacy at first, right? And we do have the ticking clock of the huge threat that Earth can be destroyed. So it does make character sense that she would lean that way, for sure.
Yeah. I've been trying to figure out the significance because we already have like such a huge ensemble cast, and the fact that we spent time in that scene with like the president and that one representative who's from what's his face's office, Kovich's office.
Oh, right. Yeah.
He's like his guy that he's sent, who's like supposed to be thinking about it in like the grander scheme of things, and the fact that he's like,
and all he's doing is playing Scrabble and eating Cheetos.
Yeah, like playing this game, like modern, or playing like ancient Wordle, and and like I know it's a crossword puzzle, but I had to make an ancient Wordle joke.
It's Scrabble.
But anyway, I'm like,
Gen Z.
We spent this moment on him, and so I've been trying to figure out like what I feel like he's gonna be of some significance, or else why did we just spend this time being like, you got to adjust your attitude, kind of thing. I don't know. What do you think about him?
To your point, the ensemble has gotten pretty big, though. I think we got a Nielsen reference and we didn't see Nielsen. So maybe they're pulling back a little bit, not trying to shove everybody in every episode. But he did get some screen time today, and it does make you wonder why. Right?
Yeah.
Like what is he bringing? And but I was partly distracted because I'm terrible at crossword puzzles and I couldn't figure out that damn word. So
I have a theory.
Okay.
What's your theory?
He's a 10C in disguise.
He's not big enough.
Those bones were huge.
I can't wait to see what this is.
Yeah, maybe they can transfer consciousness or something.
The other thing is I'm wondering and worrying is, what if those bones and like a lot of the relics that they found were actually of a species that wiped out 10C?
Right.
Like, what if that was like a battle space and the giant bones are not actually 10C?
And they go in with all this context about the 10C aggressors.
Yes.
To try to contact 10C and it backfires.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
I really did like, though, this approach to kind of xenobiology and understanding, and the message that it gave was, it wasn't so much about just trying to figure out how to figure out their language, right? It wasn't so much about language, but it was about culture, right? And finding a common ground on how we connect. And I think that's super important, because when you're thinking about communication and having divergent viewpoints, it's so important to figure out where your common ground stands. And so Burnham spending the time to be able to then go and say, okay, well, we too care about our young. We too, like, we want you to stop because we are a society that cares and tries to protect our growing species. So I felt like that was great. But then I also love the fact that Saru came in and said, yeah, but just because you have that common ground, that's not a guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I thought that there's so many of these little moments in here that were just kind of profound. And that's what I love about Star Trek is it's almost one, there's a philosophical, man, how do I take what I just saw in an aspirational way and apply that to my life? So great. Maybe if I'm having conflict with somebody at work, let's think about common ground. But also, they also, it might not be enough, but they also snuck in a little bit of like, hey, let me tell you about Rosetta, the Rosetta Stone, and why it's called Rosetta Stone and what that means. And we'll just give you a little bit of history. So now that if you're ever talking about how we, were able to translate hieroglyphics, now know it took 2 languages, and we found like, I like that. I'm a bit of a history buff. I kind of like that stuff. So yeah, I thought it was great.
You guys are making me recontextualize this episode and appreciate it more. Thank you.
Huzzah.
I think I needed that. I think I needed that for this one.
Yeah. I also really I thought, you said something about the pacing, Mike, but I kind of enjoyed it was a little bit, there was a sense of urgency that's been placed on it because now we have the ticking clock, which I think helped the pacing feel more urgent throughout, right? But then we also had like, I always appreciate a few moments of levity, like when Linus comes in and it's just like, it's making steamed bananas. Mm-hmm. Like, we got to go fix these replicators. And then you get Reno, who's like drinking a Klingon warrior beverage, which I needed to go back. Was she actually drinking prune juice? Because I know that there's like that joke with Worf.
I think she had a Rectagino, didn't she?
Oh, okay. That might have been it. Yeah. Hold the nutmeg.
Yeah.
But I thought that was kind of, and I also really liked the Reno and Adira moment together as well, when Reno is giving some solid advice on how to make friends. But I like seeing these sort of smaller circles and like these moments where you see the crew caring for each other, even in these like huge moments of potential universal catastrophe. It's still like we can take a beat and take care of each other, like the way that Burnham had like the specific it's like a Caribbean drink for Culber when he comes in and he's like, oh, this tastes like home. Like now I feel more at ease. Yeah. I can talk to you a little bit more about how I'm feeling about stuff and how even I'm potentially not going to be okay all the time.
To your point, Mariah, the drinks in both of these episodes today were significant, right? One of the ways in Picard that we truly understood this was a completely different time period, like this was a completely different experience, is when Harvey
hold on.
Okay.
I think that's the second episode.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that next week.
Yeah, I was like, are you talking about the hooch when
yes,
Picard is like,
that's exactly,
it's not top shelf, it's time for hooch.
Yeah.
Yes. I was like, I don't know who Harvey is, so we've obviously gone off the train here.
On another note, Whoopi is confirming what I thought, that Steamed Bananas was a Lower Decks reference.
Yes.
Yeah. Because the replicator is making steamed bananas in that one episode.
There's a really good interview with Tawny Newsome that just came out this week where she talks about how she's like constantly campaigning for there to be a Lower Decks movie that's like primarily all the live action actors. But then she also mentioned how all of the Trek rooms are in communication with each other to like be able to do references like that to prove that Lower Decks is canon and like all of these different things. And I was like, I love it so much.
I'm with it.
I would love it. That cast is stellar. It would be hilarious. And everybody, if you love Jack Quaid, if you love Boimler, watch the new Scream. He owns it. He's so funny.
Oh, well, we have very disparaging different views about the new Scream movie.
I thought
Quaid was fine, but yeah.
He's hilarious. It was fun. I was drunk when I watched it. Okay.
I think that is key.
For sure. Yeah. Jasmine, what's her name, was great. I thought she stole it, actually. Okay. Well, we're past the hour. I'm super
not done
happy
talking about
Picard's back.
disco.
All right, fine.
Mariah's got more in the disco tank.
Bring it.
Well, anyway, I was going to just bring up the fact, so like the powder and like the pheromones and the idea that even once we leave a place or leave something, like we are leaving our trauma and our emotions, and there are things that go beyond like your history. So these creatures, they didn't leave any actual like quote unquote relics, right? But what's even more powerful than a relic? It's like our emotions and our connections and essentially humanity, right? Like what's at the core of all of this humanity, you know, in quotes, to represent the larger like spectrum across Star Trek. But yeah, that's it. That's fine. I guess I'm excited. I'm stoked. I really enjoyed the episode.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll be back soon, next Thursday, to cover some more Picard, some more disco. Mariah, tell people how they can find us and help us out.
Yeah, so you can visit startrekpod.co to find links to where you can listen to or watch the podcast, how you can find the live stream. There's also links to our Patreon there. So if you would like to support us and join us in our Slack community, which is a great place to be. I know tonight they're doing a late night watch along of some Stargate, correct, Clyde?
That is season 1, episode 7.
All right, some adjacent sci-fi material. Maybe we'll have to do some 12 Monkeys, since that's the other showrunner on Picard now, which I think could be fun. But yeah, you can visit us startrekpod.co or patreon.com/StarTrekPod. Clyde.
I was just going to say, there's so many Star Trek characters who show up in various shows that the adjacency is huge. Yeah. I was watching Justified because, well, it's a great show, and Robert Picardo showed up early in the first season, and I was like, there we go. They're everywhere. So yeah, come hang out with us at Patreon, and we can do some Star Trek adjacent stuff.
Yeah.
Now,
go ahead.
I was going to say, and if you want to continue to follow what we're doing, check us out at Star Trek Pod. You can hang out with us on Instagram and Twitter, and give a quick shout out to Karen, who runs our Twitter. What's up, Karen? Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everyone. We'll be back next week. Live long and prosper.
Bye.